This practice test is almost like tomorrow's test, almost identical. Tomorrow's test will be shorter. There is a typo right here. It says, state the correct multiple choice answers for number 1 and 2 above. It's 1, 2, and 3, right? And I left the multiple choice answer. I did the whole thing multiple choice because that's how your final is going to be. So I want to get you used to the multiple choice and the type of questions that you're going to see on the final. So this video we're about to do is a great way to actually study for the final exam itself. A lot of these questions that come out on this practice test, that come out on the test, come out on the final as well. So let's begin by looking at these graphs. We need to state the end behavior. We need to state if it's an odd degree or even degree, and state how many real zeros it has, how many real answers it has. So let's look at the end behavior. Go ahead and pick an option, A, B, C, D, or E. C? Let's go with C. Why not? C, it reads, the end behavior of a graph, it says, is f of x, the graph will go, now these are your y values, right? And y is up and down. Okay, y is up and down. So this is saying your graph will go up as your x's go where? To the left or to the right? To the left. That's what this means, right? Your y's go down as your x's go to the left. So again, your y's go down as your x's go to the left. So which y's go down? Does this one go down as you go to the left? No, it goes up as you go to the left. Does this one go down as you go to the left? Yes, and so does this one. So it's either this one or this one so far if we test C, right? So let's continue reading. And your y's go up as you look at it where? To the left or to the right? To the right. To the right. This goes up to the right. This goes up to the right. So it could be both of them, right? So that didn't really help us. Let's continue reading. It's an odd degree polynomial. Well, how do you know if it's odd or even? Depends on your end behavior. If you have 2 end behaviors up there, it's an even. If you only have 1 up there and 1 down here, then it's odd. So both of these are odd and both of these are odd. So let's go to our final fact that they give on option C. The function has 3 real zeros. Which one has 3 real zeros? 3. So C belongs to 3. Has 3 real zeros. 1, 2, 3. Cool? So do we know how to read this? Or should we? Yes? Let's do one more. Let's take a look at option A and let's see which one that is. It says the end behavior as y goes up. No, y goes up. Your graph goes up as you look where? To the right. This one goes up to the right and this one goes up to the right. The y's go up as you look at it where? To the left or to the right? To the left. This one goes up. So far it could be this one. It's an even degree polynomial. Is this an even degree polynomial? Yes, because it has both end behaviors up here. Has 1, 2 arrows up here. That's an even number. If it only had 1 up there and 1 down here, then it'd be an odd degree. Even degree, odd degree. Even degree, odd degree, right? So the last fact, the function has 4 real zeros. Does this one actually have 4 real zeros? Yes. Yep, there you go. That's your answer. So I think you guys could figure out number 2. I guess on this video I'll do the odd ones, all right? So number 1 was A. Number 3 was C. Let's jump to number 5. You know what? I'd rather do 4. 4 is a little bit more challenging than 5. So I'm going to be jumping around on this test. If you want the other ones, the other problems, you could watch the other videos that I've already uploaded. So right here, what could we do to factor? You can't pull out a GCF, but what could you do? Sum of 2 cubes. So if you don't remember, sum of 2 cubes formula, I'll write it right here on the side. If you have a cubed plus b cubed, you could write it in factor form as a binomial times a trinomial. The binomial will be exactly the same binomial without the cubes. So that'll be a plus b. And the trinomial begins with a squared. And if you had a plus, then the middle term will be a minus. And of course you have a and b both in the middle. and then plus b squared at the very end. Hopefully you guys remember that. Now, in order for us to be able to do this problem, we need to identify our a value and our b value. And the only way to do that is to set this up. Parenthesis cubed plus parenthesis cubed. So let's look at this first term, which is 64x to the third. What times itself 3 times will give you 64x to the third? 4 and x, right? 4x times 4x is 16x squared times another 4x will get you the 64x to the third. So we should all put a 4x in that first spot, which identifies that as the a value. The b value is going to be what? This 5y, right? So let's put a 5y right in there. So now that we know our a value and our b value, we could jump right to our binomial times a trinomial. So what's the binomial going to be? It's going to be the exact same binomial without the cubes. So what are we going to have in there? And on the trinomial, I recommend putting parentheses wherever you plug in your a squared, your ab, and your b squared. So that's what I'm going to do. A squared. Now, if you started with the plus, the middle term is going to be a minus. So you're going to have a minus ab, and then plus b squared at the very end. So plugging in our values, we're going to have a 4x in the a 5y in the b, and when we do our math on the trinomial, we'll get our final answer. 4x times 4x is 16x squared. 4 times 5 is 20. X times y is xy. There is a minus sign right there. And 5y times 5y is positive 25y squared. Don't forget about the original binomial, 4x plus 5y. So that's the completely factored form, answer of number 4. But it asks you which of the following is one of those factors, or are they both there? What do you say? What's the answer? A, B, C, D, or E? D. D. Nothing else. A doesn't work because it doesn't have a plus sign between them. So if you figured that one out, you could easily do number 5. It's just the difference of 2 cubes. And let's jump to number 6. There's 2 ways of doing the number 6. One way is to use the difference of 2 cubes formula on this. If you see the x cubed minus 64 cubed, and you think maybe I could set this up, well, what belongs in the first parenthesis and x, what belongs in the second parenthesis? What times itself 4 times is 64? 4, there you go. So now that you know a and b, you could set up your binomial times your trinomial. And on this one, I'm going to show you how you don't have to use parentheses, but it's a good idea too. What's the first binomial going to be?
X minus 4.
X minus 4, all right. Now, right here you have a squared, and when you have a simple letter or a simple number, you don't really need the parentheses. You could actually do it in your head. It's when you have both, like a 4x or a 3x squared, that's when you should use parentheses. It gets more complicated. But if you say, okay, a squared is really just x squared, right? What is, it says plus because it started with the minus, it's now going to be plus. What's a times b? What's a times b? What's x times 4? 4x. And last but not least, plus b squared. What is b squared? 16. Right? To not confuse anybody, let me actually write down the formula. A cubed minus b cubed is equal to a binomial a minus b times a trinomial a squared, plus ab plus b squared. Okay, that's the formula. So once we identify the a and the b, you simply just plug in your a and your b, your a and your b's, and you're good. So the a value is x, the b value is 4, So right here, where you have a squared, you really have an x squared. So that's how you get the x squared right there. And then a times b, that's x times 4. You just rearrange it 4x. And of course, b squared, that's really a 4 squared. That's 16. Anyway, we have factored it. And notice that the problem says divide it by the binomial x minus 4. So if you divide it by x minus 4, the binomials cancel out, and that's your answer. That's one way of doing it. You don't have to do it that way. They really want you to divide, right? So you could use synthetic division if you wanted to. So let's use synthetic division as an alternative way of doing this problem. So what would be inside the box on synthetic division? Positive 4. That's right. Whatever you see here, you think opposite. Now, why is that? Because if you set this equal to 0, x will equal 4, right? So that's why we plug in the x value of 4. Now we're going to go with the coefficients, and we have to represent every single power. What's the coefficient on the x squared? What's the coefficient on, what's the coefficient on x cubed? 1. What's the coefficient of x squared? 0. What's the coefficient of x? 0. What's the constant at the end? Negative 64. So as you go down, you combine 1 plus nothing is 1. As you go up, you multiply. 4 times 1 is 4. As you go down, you combine 0 plus 4, 4. As you go up, you multiply. 4 times 4, 16. As you go down, you combine 0 plus 16, 16. As you go up, you multiply. 4 times 16, 64. And that cancels out remainder of 0. So this right here is our answer. How are we going to write it? As a quadratic trinomial, x squared plus 4x plus 16. Same exact answer, just done with two completely different methods. One using the difference of two cubes formula, the other one actually dividing with synthetic division. And technically, there's a third way of doing it with long division, but that's lame. Let's not do that. Should we skip this one? You guys should be able to factor that, right? Yeah. You factor out the GCF of 2, and then you still have to do that multi-step process to factor the inside of the parentheses, going a times c, thinking of the multiples of that answer that combine to give you b. If you need help on number 7, watch my other video on my YouTube channel. Number 8, how would you factor that? Could you pull out a GCF from all 4 terms?
Yeah. No.
Yes.
No.
Oh, no.
You have to split it into 2 groups. That's called factoring by grouping. First group will be x squared minus xy space plus 3x minus 3y. What could we pull out of the first group?
X.
What would be left over on the inside?
X minus y.
There you go. What could he pull out of the second group? Positive 3. What's going to be left over on the inside?
X minus y.
And luckily, we have the same exact binomial left over in the first group and the second group that we're going to pull out of both groups. So I'm going to pull out this common binomial of x minus y. And I'm going to put my exaggerated parentheses. And what do I have left over? The x is left over. And also the 3 is left over. So my answer is x minus y times x plus 3. That's the factored form. Of course, tomorrow's test, it will be multiple choice. And if you see both of those binomials, you circle both of them. If you only see one of them, you circle one of them. If you don't see any of them, you put none of these, right, on the multiple choice. Let's flip the paper over. Let's do one of each in this section. So, they give you a polynomial and one of its factors. Okay, they give you a polynomial and one of its factors. Whenever you divide a polynomial by one of its factors, your remainder will be 0. It should be 0, right? If you'd say, well, 4 is a factor of 12. If you divide 12 by 4, you're not going to have a remainder. Because when you divide something by its factors, you get a nice, beautiful answer, no remainder. So right here, I'm going to divide with the value positive 3 using synthetic division, right? Give me the coefficients.
1, -1, -5, and -3.
Good. Nothing was missing, so you just jotted them right down. As you come down, you combine 1 plus nothing is 1. As you go up, you multiply. 3 times 1 is 3. Okay, and then as you go down, you combine negative 1 plus 3,
2,
2. As you go up, you multiply 3 times 2,
6,
6. As you go down, you combine negative 5 plus 6,
1,
1. And as you go up, you multiply 3 times 1,
3.
3. There you go. What's left over? Nothing. That doesn't surprise me because we already knew that this was a factor. They told us it was a factor. And whenever you divide something by one of its factors, you get 0 as a remainder. So they're asking us for the other factors. If I didn't have 3 numbers here, I would keep going. But I have 3 numbers. That's a quadratic. I could deal with quadratics. X squared plus 2x plus 1. So the question is, could I factor this quadratic? And the answer is yes. X, what times what is 1 that if I combine together is 2?
Positive 1 and positive 1.
Positive 1 and positive 1 is correct. So to write the completely factored form, it would be the x minus 3 that they gave us and these new x plus 1 times x plus 1. Multiple choice answer, which of the following is a factor? The only one is D. So you're going to do number 10 the exact same way. Number 11, what should we do, 11 or 12? You pick one.
12.
You know what, 11's a little harder. You want to go for the harder one? Okay, 11. So we have a 4th degree huge polynomial right there. They tell us to find all the roots, find all the answers, find all the solutions, all the x-intercepts, whatever you want to call them. And I taught you guys the rational root theorem, which is plus or minus p over r will give you a list of all the possible answers to this quartic, disgusting polynomial equation. So how do we do p over r? You go the constant over the original leading coefficient. You think of all the multiples of negative 8 and then put them over all the multiples of 1, which there is no multiples of 1, it's just 1. So what possible answers could you have? Could 1 be an answer? Yes, because 1 times 8 could give you 8. But that means also negative 1 could also be an answer. How about 2 and also negative 2? 3? No, because 3 times nothing will give you 8. 4?
Yes.
So 4 and negative 4, that's a possible answer. And 8 and negative 8. So we have 8 different numbers. I mean, if we're very unlucky, we could test 7 and not get the right answer, right? If we're very unlucky. But it's a multiple choice test. The final is a multiple choice test. So take a look at those multiple choices. And would you start by testing 8 or negative 8?
No.
Heck no. There is no 8 or negative 8 in any of these answers. So the one that you see the most is negative 1. So why not test negative 1? Let's do that. Let's put a negative 1 inside the box. So we're going to test this guy, see if it works. If it doesn't, we'll scratch it out. But what are the coefficients? We have 1, 4, negative 3, negative 14, negative 8. So as you come down, you add 1 plus nothing is 1. As you go up, you multiply. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. As you come down, you add 4 plus negative 1 is 3. As you go up, you multiply. Negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. As you come down, you combine. Negative 3 plus negative 3 is negative 6. As you go up, you multiply. Negative 1 times negative 6 is positive 6. As you come down, negative 4 and 6 is 8, negative 8. And as you go up, you multiply. Negative 1 times negative 8 is positive 8. Remainder 0. That means we found an answer. X equals negative 1. Yay. So we have one answer. We need another answer. So again, we're not going to guess at 8 because 8's not even on there. And you know what? Let me tell you this, guys. If you saw a pattern like 1 and 3 and 1 and 3, you could write your depressed polynomial, which means you will be able to factor by grouping if you see a pattern. Right here, there's no pattern, so it's going to be a cubic polynomial. You won't be able to factor it, so there's no point in changing it to a polynomial. So let's continue and guessing a different number. What other number would you guess, especially based on the answers above?
2.
2. All right, so let's try 2. Now, since the negative 1 did work, we could actually use these 4 numbers instead of the original 5. Okay, it worked, so this is the coefficients that I could use now. So let's test the number 2 that you guys said with the same coefficients, 1, 3, -6, -8. So as you go down, you combine 1 plus 0 is 1. As you go up, you multiply 2 times 1 is 2. As you go down, you combine 3 plus 2 is 5. As you go up, 2 times 5 is 10. As you go down, you combine -6 plus 10 is 4. As you go up, you multiply 2 times 4 is 8. And yes, we guessed right again. 2 is an answer. X equals 2. Now, I could continue to plug in -4 and see if it works. However, down here, I have a quadratic trinomial. And whenever I have a quadratic trinomial, I want to write it out because I know I could factor, split, and solve, or at the very least, I could use a quadratic formula. X squared plus 5x plus 4, if it equals to 0, if I could factor, split, and solve, I'll be done. Could I factor? What times what is 4? That if you combine together is 5. +1 times +4. Which means that when I split them, x plus 1 equals 0 and x plus 4 equals 0. You get two answers, x equals -1 and x equals -4. So what are our 4 answers? We have -1, +2, and we also have x equals -1 again, and x equals -4. So that is option B. -1, -1, 2, and -4. You guys could do number 12. By the way, on number 12, I believe that when you get to this point, when you write your quadratic, x squared plus 5x plus 4, you're not going to be able to factor it like we did right here. So what do you do with that quadratic trinomial if you're not able to factor it? The quadratic formula. And that makes total sense because you have imaginary answers on all of them. So your imaginary is going to come from when you do the quadratic formula, you're going to end up with a negative inside your square root. If you want to see number 12, please watch the other videos that I posted on my YouTube channel. Let's do number 13, then you guys could try number 14, or maybe we should do 14. 14's harder. Yeah, we'll do 14, then you guys could try 13 on your own. We have 3 answers here, guys. Let's all write them down right here. X equals -1. X equals +4. X equals, let me do this one in blue, 3i. And we learned a theorem yesterday, that's the complex conjugate theorem. If you have a complex number as a solution, then that conjugate will also be a solution. If you have an imaginary number like 3i, if that's a solution, then there's also the conjugate of that, which is a solution, which is what? -3i, perfect. Now, what we got to think of is where do these answers come from? See, they came from a binomial that when we split it with zero product property, we set equal to 0 and solved. That's where these answers came from. So what would the binomial be that gives us the answer -1? You don't have to think. All you got to do is set it equal to 0. Check it out. +1, +1. What's the binomial? X plus 1 equals 0. This is the binomial that we set equal to 0 to get the answer -1. We're doing everything backwards, all right? We got the answers, we're working backwards. What binomial did this one come from? X minus 4. If you subtract 4, you'll have x minus 4 equaling 0. And there's a binomial that you set equal to 0 to get that answer, x equals 4. Where did this answer come from? Don't think, just do. Subtract 3i, x minus 3i. That's a binomial that you solved to get the answer x equals +3i. Which means that this guy over here will be what? X plus 3i. When you set that equal to 0 and you solve it, you get the x equals -3i. So with the zero product property, you usually split it and set them each equal to 0 to solve. But since we're working backwards, we're going to put them all together. Okay, we're going to put the x plus 1 times x minus 4 times the x minus 3i times the x plus 3i. Now, I purposely put the imaginary, the complex binomials in red and the regular ones in black. Whenever you have complex numbers, imaginary numbers, please start with those, especially because they're conjugates. When you multiply a complex number by its conjugate, the imaginaries disappear. Check it out. X times x, x squared. X times 3i, we're just going to put it together, +3i with an x. -3i times x, that's a negative 3i with an x, and negative 3i times positive 3i, negative 3 times positive 3, that's negative 9. I times I is I squared. So notice, when I combine the middle terms, they're exact opposites. They completely disappear. They're no longer there. And then at the very end, you have negative 9 times I squared, which is really a negative 1. So what's negative 9 times negative 1? A positive 9. So you have an x squared in front with the positive 9 at the end. So those two imaginary values in those binomials, when you multiply them together, they give you a single quadratic binomial. And then we're going to do the same for the black binomials over here. We're going to multiply x times x squared, x times negative 4, negative 4x, 1 times x, positive 1x, 1 times negative 4, negative 4. Combine the middle terms, they do not cancel out. You're going to end up with x squared minus 3x minus 4. Now that's a trinomial, but we still need to multiply it by that red binomial. So you're gonna write this red binomial either right here or over here, wherever you want. Do you guys want the x squared plus 9 on the right side or the left side? So normally I would write the x squared plus 9 over here, but let's say that you wrote it on the right side. It doesn't really matter. You're going to distribute the smaller one into the bigger one, okay? So you're going to go x squared times x squared. It's going to be x to the 4th. X squared times negative 3x, it's going to be a negative 3x to the 3rd. X squared times negative 4, that's going to be a negative 4x squared. Now that we've distributed the x squares, let's go with the 9. 9 times x squared is positive 9x squared. 9 times negative 3x is negative 27x. 9 times negative 4 is negative 36. The only thing we could combine are the x squares with the x squares. Wait a minute. Let me erase that. So our final answer will be x to the 4th minus 3x to the 3rd plus 5x squared minus 27x minus 36. Multiple choice answer. Which one is that? Option A. Ladies and gentlemen, I've done half, actually a little bit more than half. You guys need to do the other half. Tomorrow's test will be almost identical to this. If you want to see the ones that are missing, watch the other video on my YouTube channel. Tomorrow's test will be reduced down to 12 questions, not 14. That's good and bad, right? If you miss one, it's like you're dropping almost a letter grade. So be careful. Do it slowly and correctly. Not only study for tomorrow's test, but this practice test will also get you ready for a large portion of the final exam. So please study hard because it comes out on the final next week as well.